TellyCast, the TV industry news review.
Hi, I'm Justin Crosby, and welcome to another TellyCast. On this week's show, it's the return of Commissioner's Corner, where we get to chat to the industry's leading commissioners to find out what they're buying and why, what they're avoiding, and get some tips on the do's and don'ts of pitching. This week's guest is Lee McMurray, commissioning editor of Factual Entertainment at UK public service broadcaster Channel 4. It's coming right up on this week's TellyCast. So welcome to the show, Channel 4's Lee McMurray. Lee, how are you doing?
Hello, good morning, Justin. I'm good, thank you. How are you? You're good? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just sort of getting over Edinburgh. You know, it was great to be there. The dust is starting to settle. We've had a bank holiday in the UK, so that was much needed. How about you? You were up there as well, weren't you?
I was, but I didn't enjoy it as much as I would have liked. I was I was working a lot of the time. I didn't get to as many sessions as I would have liked. I should say I'm currently in an edit. So if there is any chatter or background noise, apologies for that in advance. We're just in the middle or towards the back end of delivering Married at First Sight UK. So no rest for the wicked.
No. We promise not to listen in on any of the notes that you're giving the production team there while we're running through that. Are you a prodigious note giver, Lee? Is that something that you do? You do a great deal within a production?
Well, one tries to be as helpful and detailed as possible. Hopefully it is received in that spirit of being helpful and detailed.
Yeah. Well, coming to talk about this because, you know, I've always been fascinated about the role of a commissioner and actually, you know, what goes on behind the scenes to a certain extent in terms of, you know, what's required, the multifaceted role and a lot of the aspects of the role that as a producer you don't necessarily see. So for people that don't know you, Lee, tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into TV and how your career developed to the point of you being commissioning editor at Channel 4.
I actually trained to be a journalist. I've always been quite nosy and enjoyed writing, and I'm fascinated by people. So I thought, well, journalism is the perfect job for me. So I started out training to be a journalist and then realised print journalism wasn't quite for me, so switched to broadcast journalism. I did a postgrad course at Strathclyde University after graduating from Edinburgh. I got a work placement there as a researcher for Walk Clements, as it was called then, up in Glasgow. I never looked back, really. I got that work placement, worked on a couple of Channel 5 shows, really enjoyed it, and thought, this is probably the career for me. And then it all went from there. I moved down from Glasgow to the BBC to work for the BBC for a couple of years. So I moved down from Glasgow to London to work for the BBC in 2002 and just sort of climbed my way up the greasy pole, worked on lots of different shows and different roles, worked my way up through the different levels in television, from researcher to AP to producer to series producer and then eventually exec producer. I'm a commissioner in Factual Entertainment, and Factual Entertainment is the genre that I've always worked in its broadest sense. I've worked on all sorts of different popular factual shows and formats, and I've got a bit of an eclectic CV. I've done everything from sort of live events to studio shows to formats to observational documentary, I guess, as well. So I've got quite a broad background and a wide range of experience. When I was showrunning and execing, I made Secret Eaters for Channel 4, What Happens in Kavos for Channel 4. I worked on a couple of Gareth Malone series for BBC Two.
That was a Naked Choir. You worked on a Naked Choir, didn't you? Which was quite a noisy show.
Yeah, I loved that show, actually. I really enjoyed working on it. It was sort of taking the best bits of Gareth and trying to make it a bit more entsy, a bit more entertainmenty. So we had all his classic shtick and approach of going in and trying to make people the best they can be at performing and singing and, you know, fanning the flames of their love and enthusiasm for music and performing. You know, so all the things you loved about Gareth from his documentary series, and that was combined with a contest element. So you had these a cappella choirs who would love being tutored and mentored by Gareth. He'd, you know, bring them on in leaps and bounds in terms of their abilities and performance, and do it with such passion and gusto. And then once he'd done all that, they all went head to head in a contest, eliminated week after week, until one emerged as the winner. I really enjoyed that series. It allowed me to indulge all the things that I really enjoy, some storytelling, character, but with some entertainment sensibilities as well. So there was that. There was also I worked on Life is Toff with the Fulford family, brought them back to British TV after 10 years off our screens. That was Grierson-nominated. That was nice. But before that, I'd done all sorts of stuff. I'd worked on Loose Women. I don't know why I'm laughing. I love that job as well. It's just a bit different to all the other stuff, I guess. And I did Paradise Hotel for Fox Reality. So, and Castaway 2007 for the BBC when they brought that back. So I'd dipped my toe in the water. Well, actually, more than dipped my toe in the water, plunged into the world of reality TV as well.
As you say, it's a very wide-ranging background you've got, which you would say is a great grounding for a role as a commissioner. Lots of executive producing for lots of different production businesses in your career before you joined Channel 4. Were you ever tempted to start or to stay with a production company for a longer period of time to become an integral part of a company's management? Or were you much more focused on moving from show to show and building your career in that direction?
Well, certainly towards the end, I really did start to want to put down roots and find a home, not least because as a freelancer, it can be precarious. I mean, I was never really out of work for long periods of time. So it turned out I didn't need to worry. But that's fine, thinking that retrospectively. But when you're a gun for hire and you have to hop from project to project to project, it did get to a point where that uncertainty and insecurity was a bit wearing. So yeah, towards the end, I wanted to put down roots. But prior to that, I kind of enjoyed picking and choosing projects and being able to have some autonomy and control over that. When you go and work as a member of staff at a company, your projects are sort of, you'll have some say in it, but they'll be doled out to you. And you kind of have to accept that the projects that you're given are the projects that you're going to run. Whereas when you're a freelancer, as I say, you can pick and choose and you have that freedom so you can vary and mix up the sort of projects you work on. And if you've had enough of one type of thing, you can try your hand at something else, to an extent. That was quite fun to be able to hop around doing, maybe a formatted 8:00 show for one project, and then the next would be an doc kind of format, and the next would be a whittle format. Before I joined Channel 4, I spent 2 years working at 2020, where I went to make the Gareth Malone series. And there was something about the culture and the people there that I really enjoyed and felt at home with and comfortable with. So I was there for 2 years and was employed as in a staff role there as an exec producer before I got the call from Channel 4.
For somebody with your sort of background, loads of exec production credits and having just really had one career within TV, within the role of making TV shows, you seem to be the sort of person that would launch their own indie. Ever been tempted to do that in the last few years?
No.
Okay.
Well, there's two things going on there. To our earlier point, part of the reason I enjoyed freelancing and was a producer for so long is that I really enjoy delivering. I enjoy the art and the craft of making programs and making them really good and being really proud of them and then putting them out there and have viewers enjoy them. I kind of like getting my hands dirty and I like making things. So I really enjoy the craft of TV program making. And when you're a showrunner on a show, it's very much your baby. You're the beating heart of it. When you create something, you feel real ownership of it and pride in it. So I really enjoy that. So, I was reluctant to let that go as I moved my way up and as I went from producing into commissioning. In terms of starting up my own indie, I think it's really tough. Nowadays. Yes, you can be successful, but I think anyone who sets up their own indie nowadays is really brave. There are so many production companies nowadays fighting for a slice of the pie. It's never been harder to get a hit show for all sorts of reasons I'm happy to go into. And the burden of responsibility falls very squarely, a lot of the time, it feels like, on the shoulders of the people running the company. So I wouldn't say I'm risk averse naturally, but didn't feel like the sort of thing I wanted to do. I'd love to be a millionaire. I'd love to set up a production company, have a massively successful format and make loads of money and sell it around the world. As I talk about it now, maybe you're on something, Justin. Maybe it is something I should do.
The thing is, I think that certainly the indies that I've had pleasure to work with over the years, it's very clear that there's a real business mind that you need to be successful. This is obvious, right? But dealing with the HMRC or dealing with recruiting and staffing and searching for an office and dealing with leases and all that sort of stuff is a part of the job, which, you can't escape when you run your own indie. And as you say, to a certain extent, it sort of takes you away from the coalface of execing a show, but actually getting your hands dirty, then certainly it's something that I think takes you away from that real program making role.
Yeah, I think so. What are we now, 2022? Maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it was almost a natural progression of a commissioner is that they would work as a producer, they would go and be a commissioner, and then they'd leave the channel, set up their own company. And a lot of those people, made a lot of money and were very successful, and all power to them. But I think it's changed. It's changed so much. The TV landscape has changed so much that trajectory is not the natural trajectory for commissioners anymore, and it's not that straightforward anymore. It's not as easy.
I think you're right, and it might be a bit of a rude awakening for some who think, obviously, being involved in the making of and commissioning of shows and then being on the other side of the fence, and it's like, what do you mean? No, this is a brilliant idea, clearly. And then,
yeah. And winning business is not something that I enjoy. I don't get a buzz out of being a salesman. I'd get a buzz out of having loads of money, but I don't get a natural kick out of being a salesman. I'm much more turned on and excited by the creative and editorial and making a program than making money out of it. That's probably a silly attitude. Maybe I could be a lot richer if I changed my attitude.
Well, the other question is that, and I'm sure a lot of the indies that may be listening to this is like, does the world need another indie? Is the first question.
Yeah, there is that.
Do we need more competition? Is the pie getting smaller or is it getting bigger? There's obviously lots of discussion about that, particularly when it comes to domestic PSB broadcasters. Obviously, we know there's lots more money coming through streamers. But anyway, maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. So let's talk about Channel 4 then. You started at Channel 4. What was the first show you commissioned for the network?
The very first thing I commissioned was a series called Posh Frock Shop. I started at the channel in 2017, and not long after that, I got a taster tape, a sizzle reel from an indie called 1911. They'd filmed with this guy called Ian Stewart, who was a very successful dress designer and bridal wear designer. He ran this small, really unique boutique just around the corner from Channel 4, would you believe? It wasn't intentional, it was pure coincidence. And the characters on this tape, just call it a tape, which is bizarre nowadays, no one uses tape. This taster tape, this sizzle reel, the characters in it were really entertaining, really funny, they just popped, they were perfect for television. I joined the channel when Jay was running Channel 4, and we took it into our meeting with Jay, our routine with Jay, and I thought, this might be quite a fun sort of one-off entertaining character doc or something. And she sort of said, no, let's do it in daytime and let's do 25 of them. Pretty much.
Really?
Yeah, 25 eps. So I had a 25 part series on my hands pretty early on. And it did really well. It was a really fun show. It was played in daytime. I think it was 5:30. So come down with me slot. And it did really well. I think it was the second most successful daytime launch in 5 years or something as an origination, as a new format. And we were really happy with it, really delighted with it.
You took that taster tape to Jay Hunt, who at that point was Chief Creative Officer at Channel 4. If that was your first show to be commissioned, you're basically saying, okay, my chips are on this. What's it like going for the first time to your boss and saying, I think we should make this show, when you haven't done that before? It's not, it's the first time you've said, we should make this. were you relieved, or were you emboldened by the fact there was a really good taster tape? Is that really what, made your job easier and convinced you to take it internally to Jay Hunt? Was it the strength of the tape that gave you the confidence to take that to Jay?
Do you know, it was, Justin, actually, and it's an interesting point which we may or not come back to if you'd like to, that, these sizzles and tasters can be really, really helpful. Increasingly, back in the day, let's go back a couple of decades or even 10 years ago, I think, I seem to remember things were commissioned on the strength of a treatment or even just a conversation. But nowadays, the sizzle reel, the taster tape, has become a really effective tool for pitching to channels and for pitching internally within a channel. If you can bring the idea to life, I mean, there may be a complaint, can't you commissioners and you channel executives have enough imagination to see what it's like, in your mind's eye? Well, yes, of course we can. But actually bringing an idea to life and bringing a cast to life on screen is invaluable. It's really, really helpful.
And surely it gives the production company, especially if you haven't worked with them before, as you hadn't at this point, it gives them the opportunity to really deliver on their vision in a sort of a 2-minute tape or whatever it was, make it pop, as you say, make the characters pop, edit it in a particular way. It's not going to be the finished article. It's a great way of expressing the kind of show that they want to make.
Well, no, absolutely. It gives a sense of the tone. It gives a sense of the character. It gives a sense of, what the TV show might be like in a very simple, effective televisual way, and so, when you get something like that, it does give you confidence when you go into the room. I mean, I said earlier, I don't really enjoy being a salesman, but actually a big part of the job as a commissioner is selling the idea internally. So, the indies and companies bring it to you, and then it's your job to, if you believe in it and you want to get it green lit, it's your job to then sell that idea effectively internally up the chain of command. First of all, to your head of department, and then to the channel controller. And so with something like that, when you've got something that will make people laugh and sit up and pay attention, it's very funny, it's extremely helpful. And if the tape is well made, it inspires confidence that the indie in question will deliver a well-made product for you. So it's helpful in all sorts of ways. If you get something that's flat, boring, doesn't make you laugh, doesn't really engage you, and has been put together poorly, entirely the opposite is true. It's very difficult to take that into a room and sell it. So I think something like that is very helpful, but also you have to have confidence. You don't take things into that room that you don't believe in. You get pitched lots and lots of ideas, and we're the first port of call and the first filter at the channel. And if you don't think there's an audience for it, you don't think it's going to rate, you can't see how it fits within the channel's objectives or remit, then you just don't take it in.
You talked about being a filter, if you like. I mean, the first filter that a producer has to go through. I mean, you're getting pitched all the time. Literally, I'm sure when you walk from A to B, Edinburgh, you've got producers going, grabbing you or, going for lunch or whatever. I mean, how many shows or how many ideas do you think that you get pitched over the course of a week?
It depends. To be effective in the role, you have to, as in any role, manage your time. And there are times when I'm going to be very, very busy delivering shows, being effectively the exec producer at the channel, the executive at the channel who maintains quality control and is viewing EPs and signing off casts and all sorts of other things to ensure successful delivery of a commissioned program. So currently we are at the tail end, 2/3 of the way into the edit on Married at First Sight. There are 30 episodes of that show this year. So that takes up an awful lot of my time. So when my time is being eaten up delivering a series for the channel, it's not really possible to take as many pitch meetings and to do as much development. Once that's out of the way, my focus shifts. And I can spend that section of the year really focusing on meeting with indies and, having pitch meetings, developing ideas that have potential, and focusing on trying to bring new ideas to life rather than existing series.
If I'm a producer then, and I'm trying to get through to you, I'm getting really frustrated. I can't get through. I've got this perfect idea for you at Channel 4. What is the best way? Do you have to sit on your hands and wait until you've finished the edit on Married at First Sight? Or do I get you at the end of the day or the beginning of the day? Or how do I approach you? Because when you're running a business as an indie, your imperative is to make shows and you have to sell shows. So to you as the buyer. So just thinking practically, how I get an idea in front of you whilst you're editing a show. Or don't I? Or do I just have to wait and say, okay, well, it is the idea, I'll email it through and I might not hear back for a month while you're dealing with the edit? Or, what's that process like?
When we're very busy delivering a series, especially a big series like Married at First Sight, it doesn't mean that I can't take ideas and pitch meetings. It just means I won't be able to do as many as I would have liked during that time of the year. But the rest of the year, when things aren't as busy with delivery, I do obviously try and meet as many indies and take as many pitch and ideas meetings as I can. That was, I guess, just a response to your initial question about how many ideas come in a week. Well, it depends. It depends on the time of year and my workload and what's the priority for me at that time. But we get pitched lots of ideas. Yeah, lots and lots of ideas. I couldn't put a figure on it,
right?
Because there are so many.
Yeah.
But over the course of my 5 years at the channel, I'm pretty sure I've met hundreds of indies rather than dozens.
I'm looking at the shows that you've commissioned during your time. This is by no means an exhaustive list, obviously. We've got Married at First Sight season for a number of different seasons, right? 1, 2, and 5, and presumably the season that you're working on now, which is that season 7?
Yeah, it's got a bit confusing. It's season 1 and 2 and E4. But actually, in the run of Married at First Sight on the channel, I've done seasons 5, 6, and 7.
Right, okay.
It was season 5 on Channel 4, and then it was season 6 and 7 officially, but seasons 1 and 2 on E4. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because it moved from Channel 4 to E4.
Got it. Okay. I've seen that you've also commissioned a couple of shows from Curious Films, who are quite a hot London-based indie run by Dov Freeman, which is Caroline Flack, Her Life and Death, which we spoke to Dov on the show some months ago around the time that went out. It was really affecting documentary. And you've also just commissioned The Accused, National Treasures on Trial, which is, again, around Operation U-Tree and a focus on a number of UK celebrities who were accused of sex offending. There's really quite a wide range of shows there, as well as obviously the alternative Christmas message, which was the deep fake Queen. What was that like, making that show? Because that was a very different kind of show to everything else you've made, which is Factual Entertainment and a pure documentary. That deep fake Queen show must have been a very different type of technical commission, if you like, because it's about technology, isn't it?
It was a bit of a departure. That is one of the joys of this role, especially in the genre I'm in, is that the breadth of stuff you can commission is really satisfying, because I can work on anything from a very moving, powerful documentary like Caroline Flack, Her Life and Death, which, as you say, I commissioned from Curious Films. So they've got a very affecting, powerful, moving documentary like that as a one-off single. Then Married at First Sight, high-volume reality. And then a sort of 3-minute provocative but purposeful piece like the Deepfake Queen Christmas message. It was a bit of a departure. I was really excited about it. We've all been aware of this deepfake technology and enjoyed it through viral videos on YouTube and what have you, and seen how it can be really startling but also really entertaining. And I just thought, wow, this is really interesting new technology. How can we harness that for TV purposes? And there were lots of different ideas. And I was briefing that out to production companies and indies, in fact, saying, look, this is sort of quite revolutionary technology. What can we do with it? How can we make it work for TV? Could we do a version of Stars in Their Eyes where people are transformed using deepfake rather than hair and makeup? There are all sorts of ideas that I was sort of playing with and toying with and banding around. It's very expensive technology if you do it properly. So the costs could be quite prohibitive. We sort of thought, well, how could we do something that's still powerful and effective, but can be short form? And we struck upon this notion that, every year Channel 4 does something for 4 or 5 minutes that can be really powerful. We reach a wide audience. We like to do something with the alternative Christmas message that is different and sets us apart and makes a point. Suddenly it felt like it was perfect. We could make a point about how powerful but how insidious this new technology could be, the perils of it, how it could play with audiences and make us question all these issues around trust and should we believe what we're hearing and seeing in an era of fake news. So we could make all those points in a really mischievous, Channel 4 and intelligent way. Yeah, I was really proud of that particular piece I commissioned. It wasn't a 30-ep run like Married at First Sight. It was only 3 or 4 minutes worth of content, but the point it made and the purpose it had was very effective and powerful.
I'm going to ask you a few quick fire questions, which don't necessarily lend themselves to quick fire answers. But I am going to ask you these while I've got you on the line.
Oh God, you're going to put me on the spot. I'm going to fail.
Not really. Well, we'll see. Let's see if we talked about do's and don'ts of pitching, or we certainly spoke about what is effective. So you're saying taster's tape if possible, right?
Yeah, and you know what? The taster that I received from the Indie for Posh Frock Shop was self-funded. We didn't pay for it. And I think increasingly that's sort of the case nowadays. I know not all indies can maybe afford to do that, and it might be beyond their means. Wherever we can, I'd love to be able to fund development and to pay for that sort of stuff. But if that comes to you just as a matter of course, wow, it's really helpful, and we're really grateful for it.
Okay, so you're maybe 2 steps down the line. If you can deliver something that's really, really great looking taster, then that's already going to move the conversation on, probably in terms of time as well as through the commissioning process. You're going to be able to take that to Ian Katz, presuming that Ian Katz signs off on all of your commissions right now. Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that how the process works? Okay.
Yeah.
So that's going to get that idea in front of Ian Katz quicker. If you've got a great looking tape and you believe in it, then it's going to make itself through that process much quicker.
Yeah, absolutely helps. It really does.
As a commission, you've got loads of internal processes. We talked about this earlier on, to manage compliance. You're involved in marketing, I'm assuming, when your show actually starting to get towards TX, you're involved in that. You are really the internal stakeholder, aren't you, in terms of the channel? What else is there about scheduling? How does that work when you've made a great show? You've obviously got an interest in how it's marketed, how it's taken out there. But what about scheduling? What sort of influence do you have on scheduling? What's your relationship with schedulers?
We work very closely with them. They're involved in all the pitch meetings. They hear the ideas as they come in, and they'll have a view on whether they think they'll rate and how useful a piece it might be for the schedule and where it might fit in the schedule. So we have to work very, very closely with them.
Is it a symbiotic relationship? I mean, do you have disagreements with schedulers? I mean, I'm really interested to be a fly on the wall in one of those meetings to get an idea of what is the process like? Who has the final say?
Well, we are naturally one big happy family, Justin. There are never disagreements or fallouts. We all get along. We all rub along very nicely. Thank you very much. No, you have discussions. I wouldn't say they ever get particularly heated, but if you feel very strongly, passionately that your show should get a certain slot or certain preference or certain level of marketing, then you'll fight for it. Part of your job within the channel is being the representative and ambassador for the project and for the indie. And if you care about your commissions, and most of us do, we wouldn't commission the shows if we weren't excited by them or didn't believe in them. You are very happy to go into battle internally to make sure that your show gets as much exposure and the best kind of slot and campaign behind it that you can. You won't always win those battles, and you have to accept that. The channel it's a national broadcaster. It has lots of competing priorities and lots of other commissioners and other shows vying for slots and for attention and for the spotlight to be shone on them. But no, the conversations, they are pretty symbiotic, and one will influence the other. You'll discuss an idea in a pitch meeting with Ian. The schedulers will be there, and our head of strategy, Kieran, will be there sitting on it, and they will have input as to how useful a piece it will be for the schedule, whether they think it will rate. Don't forget, these guys have got a lot of experience as well. They've seen shows come and go. They've seen what's succeeded, they've seen what's failed. So they can be a useful barometer for you as well. They've worked at channels for a long time, a lot of them. They have recourse to knowledge about, we tried that 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, whatever it is, and the audience didn't take to it. They didn't like it. Tonally, it wasn't right for them. So they can be very helpful and very useful for you. And then, sometimes you may not be happy with the slot, and you can have a conversation, and it will change or it won't. And sometimes you accept it, and sometimes you push a bit harder, and then the show goes out and we see what happens.
Yeah. PSB commissioners now seem to have endless hoops to jump through in terms of hitting broadcasters' quotas. Diversity, nations and regions, sustainability, and you obviously have to commission from a variety of producers. You don't want to be seen as commissioning from one every time. How do you manage those processes? Because you're getting all of these pitches, you say, every week, and I'm assuming the percentage of pitches that get taken forward and made is a tiny percentage of what you're actually pitched. So, we realise that because there are only so many slots on the channel. But how do you manage all of those different processes to ensuring that it's nations and regions, it's diverse level, in front and behind of the camera, it's made sustainably? All of these, you would imagine that, getting the show actually made and into production after it's gone through this funnel of different deliverables, that must be so difficult to achieve.
Yes, there are a few more considerations in place than there used to be maybe 5 or 10 years ago, but not onerously so and not overly so. I think especially at Channel 4, given our remit to give a voice to unheard voices and to be the channel that challenges and represents the minority groups within the UK, we've always had that. We've always had to do that. And we've always been very good at it, if you ask me. So I don't find that as much of a challenge as might be the case at other broadcasters. We're always very mindful when we're recruiting, when we're casting, when we're thinking about ideas of the remit. And that's sort of been baked into Channel 4's DNA since its inception. So I haven't found those considerations as troubling or as difficult as perhaps you might think, or as perhaps is the case other broadcasters. The Channel 4 remit is quite unique and different to other PSBs. There are those obligations on the other PSBs, of course, obviously, especially at the BBC. But Channel 4 has always had that job to do within the broadcasting landscape in the UK of representing people who maybe don't get the same sort of representation on what you might consider the more mainstream channels. So I think back to all the shows I've commissioned and delivered to the channel, there's always been diversity in terms of LGBTQ representation, in terms of ethnic diversity and representation, in terms of the gender balance, in terms of, and one thing I am very hot on is, I'd like to think, I'm a bit of a stickler. I'm from Yorkshire. I don't just want to hear Southern voices on TV. I want to see me, my family, and my friends represented on screen. So that nations and regions commitment, I feel very keenly. And, one thing that possibly we don't talk about enough is class. I was interested to hear, Brian Cox at the festival talk about TV as being feudal and how it would be difficult for him nowadays to have the sort of success he enjoys in shows like Succession and throughout his career. I think there's a lot of work still to be done around that, and how we make it easier for people from working class backgrounds like myself to get into TV and succeed.
So one last question before we go into your story of the week, hero of the week, and get in the bin, Lee. So in terms of working with Ian Katz, how much detail do you get from him as a boss in terms of strategy to ensure that you're making the right bets and you're bringing the right shows to him?
Well, there's a conversation all the time going on between Ian and the heads of the department across all the genres, and that information is filtered down to us as commissioners. So we have a pretty clear idea at any given time, what the priorities are for the channel. And that will vary across the genres, of course, as well. What sports and current affairs want to commission is not what entertainment and factual entertainment are going to want to commission. Right now, the battle cry is for returning and returnable formats. We want things that we can bring back year after year in volume. Married at First Sight UK has been a huge success. We've just launched Series 2 last night. We're up on share. That's done very well for us. Up on share for volume, up on share for Youngs. Brilliant success. Really happy with it. That's commissioned now for at least one more season. I think maybe even 2. But, we need more of those. We need more like that. We are looking for those big, bold, colourful, exciting formats like Hunted, like The Island, like Gogglebox, like SAS, that can come back year after year at 9 o'clock and deliver big audiences for us.
And you also have a format fund, don't you? How does that play into your search for formats?
The Global Format Fund is quite specific. We have a slot for that, which is 10 o'clock. And there's a ring-fenced amount of money for that. And it comes with all sorts of obligations and conditions for both us as a broadcaster and for the production company making it. That's quite a specific scheme and initiative. And we'll probably commission, format, maybe 2 formats out of that each year. So it is a way in, and it's definitely a worthwhile initiative to be part of and to pitch into. But we have a whole load of budget and resources and slots for things outside of that as well. So now, if I had to give one bit of advice to people pitching, well, maybe this is 2 bits of advice, but it's all part of the same theme. We live in a world nowadays, and we're all part of a TV and broadcasting landscape where viewers have a paradox of choice, right? There's so much out there, and so much of it is well-funded and amazing. There are these big, shiny baubles sitting on the streamers. You think of, the Game of Thrones prequel has just launched. Rings of Power is coming. There's another Star Wars spin-off landing on Disney+. Stranger Things, I was obsessed with early this year. There are all these amazing bits of scripted content that people binge and devour and are really excited for. When you're working in unscripted, the question has to be, how do we stop people watching those shows? What are the big, exciting, colourful, dramatic ideas? When I go home at night and I've got 2 more episodes of Stranger Things to watch, how do we stop people doing that and get to think, oh no, I'm going to watch Married at First Sight tonight instead? Yesterday we had Married at First Sight launch, and the Game of Thrones prequel was on at this, roughly the same time. If you're watching live TV, how do we stop people going, right, I'm not going to watch Game of Thrones tonight, I'm going to watch Married at First Sight? We need those sorts of ideas. If you wouldn't watch it yourself as a program maker, as a producer, if you wouldn't get excited about it, why should I?
Okay. So in order to compete with those multi-million pound productions...
I know it's comparing apples and oranges to an extent. They're not the same. They don't have the same budgets. A scripted proposition is very different to an unscripted proposition. But my point is, we want ideas that people are going to get obsessed about, going to binge, going to get really excited about. It needs to be sort of must-see. Increasingly, there are ideas that you might have been pitched 10, 15 years ago that are nice ideas, that are, lovely, make you feel good ideas. They're very heartwarming, and they're great bits of TV, and they can be really well made and really well crafted. But if they don't get people excited and don't stand out, nowadays they're going to fall through the cracks and they're going to fall by the wayside. And increasingly what we're going to need to put, and we're talking here about, commercial plays, things that are going to put bums on seats and are going to rate for us. That we obviously have obligations that we take very seriously to commission stuff that speaks to our remit. And it can't all be just about ratings. But, if you want a successful show and a successful format that's going to bring a big audience, it's got to be big, it's got to be dramatic, it's got to be colourful, it's got to be exciting, it's got to be something you want to come back for, time and time again, night after night. You look at what's working in the different platforms, regardless whether it's a linear broadcast or a streamer, look at Netflix, Too Hot to Handle, Love is Blind. It's the big, bold, colourful reality series that are hugely dramatic and require an emotional investment.
Well, there we go. All our listeners, get those taster tapes in to Lee, and who knows? We could have the next SAS Who Dares Wins on the.
I would love that. I would love that. And just to say, we hate saying no to things. We hate saying no. We absolutely want to commission and want to make stuff. We've got the money to spend. We want big hits. We want ideas. So I hope anything I've said today hasn't deterred people or put people off. We're very open. We're very friendly, I like to think. And, we are desperate to commission great new content. It's scary, but there's a long road to travel to get to that point where you commission something like that. But we absolutely want to do it. So do send us your ideas. Do come and see us.
Now it's time in the show for Story of the Week, where my guests get to choose the TV industry story that's caught their eye in the past 7 days. Lee, what's your story of the week?
Well, so much went on at Edinburgh, didn't it? It's there's so much to choose from given the week we've just had. So much was talked about and discussed at Edinburgh. But the thing that caught my eye was the session with Brian Cox, who described, quite shockingly, the TV industry as feudal nowadays. He was sort of saying, Brian Cox has had a long and distinguished career, and we all love him in his role in Succession. And he was saying he probably wouldn't be able to get where he is nowadays if he started out in TV today. And I think he cited people like Eddie Redmayne and Benedict Cumberbatch, all these public school boys and there's nothing wrong with Benny Cumberbatch and Eddie Redmayne. I think they're both amazing and lovely to look at and great actors. But I guess Brian's point was you're at a distinct advantage. You're more likely to succeed nowadays if you're from a privileged background. And in 2022, it's quite shocking to hear that. And I think he's probably right. And I think we don't really talk about class enough and how we tackle the problem of getting people from working class backgrounds into TV. It's something I feel passionate about and care about because my mum was a cleaner. My dad was a taxi driver. We didn't have a lot of money growing up. And it was difficult. Even when I started out in TV, to get into TV, I had to get into a lot of debt. I had to work for free. And I've got a nice job now that I really enjoy with a decent salary, but it's been a long journey to get there. And you do tend to be, the figures speak for themselves. There are a lot of people in television who come from backgrounds that are not the same as mine. So I thought it was a really interesting point that Brian raised and one that I think is worthy of much more discussion within the industry.
Lee, now it's time to find out your hero of the week and who or what you want to get in the bin. Who's your hero of the week?
I struggled a bit with this. I'll admit, I had to do a lot of work during Edinburgh. I wasn't out off swanning around, just getting drunk and enjoying canapes with the fancy folk of television. So I spent a lot of time trapped in a hotel room, and that was the same over the weekend. So my hero is the guy who kept me fed, who kept bringing me room service and chips and sandwiches and pizzas throughout that time.
All right. Well, he's your hero of the week. And who or what do you want to get in the bin?
The word bin sparked inspiration for this. It would be the bins in Edinburgh this year. They were overflowing. I went to university in Edinburgh, and it is a beautiful city, but not last week. The bins were overflowing. There was scaffolding and boards up everywhere. You couldn't see the beautiful views either side of North Bridge down to the Scots Monument and to Arthur's Seat. Yeah, I don't know what was going on there.
Yeah, well, there's I think we're 10 days into a bin strike now, or maybe longer in Scotland. It doesn't look like it's anywhere near getting resolved soon. If you looked in some directions in Edinburgh, it sort of looked like end of days,
Yeah, it did a bit. I mean, all power to the workers. If they've got a just grievance, all power to them. But yeah, it was not the Edinburgh that I was used to this year.
No, that's true. But the Seagulls seemed very happy with.
They had a field day. The Seagulls had a field day, and there were probably a few TV executives stumbling home from a boozy party. They might have being grateful for the chips in the bin and then we head back to the hotel. Who knows? Maybe it wasn't just the seagulls. Maybe some TV people got lucky as well.
Possibly so. Lee, thank you so much for coming on TellyCast. It's been really interesting having a chat with you. There's actually loads of questions that I wanted to ask you, but we didn't get time for. So
do it again someday.
Love to do it. Love to do it again. And good luck with Married at First Sight and everything else you're commissioning. And good luck getting that great new format pitch in.
Thank you very much. Lovely talking to you, Justin. Cheers.
Well, that's it for episode 112. Thanks again to Lee McMurray at Channel 4. I really enjoyed our chat. I hope you did too. If you did, please share it with friends and colleagues. And don't forget to visit TellyCast.com, where we have exclusive features and information about all of our upcoming events. And we've got a big announcement coming soon about our TellyCast Digital Content Forum event in November. So listen out for that, as well as an exclusive offer for our previous TellyCast Content Funding Festival ticket buyers and subscribers to TellyCast.com. TellyCast is edited by Ian Chambers and recorded in London. Until next week, stay safe.